Australia has many stories. Over the last 2 years, as part of the National Library's ongoing commitment to increase the diversity of voices in the library's collection, we've been actively engaging with and collecting stories of Australians with Indian heritage, their lives and experiences, work and organisation, events and publications. My name is Cherie and I'm the Senior Advisor for Contemporary Published Material here at the Library. This includes newspapers, serials, books, maps, posters and ephemera. Ephemera is a term that covers different types of material. We collect this material as they form important insights to Australian society, snapshots of how we live, socialise, our pastimes, events we attend, and issues that shape the times we live in. So far for the Indian Diaspora in Australia project, Ephemera Collection, we have brochures, booklets, t-shirts, a tote bag, trading cards, wristband, invitations, flyers, stickers, and even a sweets box. This kit here is produced by Melbourne Sings for Sikh students starting school. The kit contains 2 cloth pudkas, some information on what a pudka is and how to tie it, a colouring sheet and stickers. Accompanying the kit is this book in our collection, Jay Singh's First Day at School, in which Jay introduces himself to his curious classmates and proudly shares his Sikh identity and explains the significance of his top knot and pudka. These items were collected by one of our curators at the start of the project when they visited communities at the Gurdwara Blackburn and Khalsa Punjabi Language School. As textual items, the pudkas are given special housing to safely preserve them within the collection. These items are all stored in our secure stacks, ready to be requested by visitors to the library in the future. I wonder if there are other parts of the community that have similar information or material that could be donated to the library to preserve and highlight for future generations and continue to add to the diversity of our collection. During the project, we also sought ongoing publications from community groups and organisations, including newspapers and newsletters. South Asia Times is an independent news organisation committing to disseminating news focused on South Asia, Australia and global issues. There is also a focus on cinema, arts, sports, science, technology, business and data news. The library had no copies of the print newspaper before the collection. While at an Indian Film Festival event, one of our project curators connected with Editor-in-Chief Niraj Nanda. Niraj located almost a complete set of the 17 print volumes and donated them to the library, and we hope to continue receiving deposit copies of the electronic version. The National Library also collects electronic works published in Australia via the National E-Deposit Service, known as NED. Zoya Patel, a writer and communications consultant, was interviewed for an oral history for the project. 2 of her works were collected under legal deposit. No Country Woman is a memoir of race, religion and feminism. And Once a Stranger, a novel about tradition, family, loss and connection. We were able to make other connections with people who were interviewed for an oral history, who also wrote books, which we then collected. These 2 books from Ikram Navik, Safarnama and The Way I Saw It, Australia and the World, were donated by Ikram after he was interviewed for the project. One is Ikram's autobiography, and the other is a collection of letters written by Ikram to newspapers over a 50-year period. Dharmi Singh sat down with oral historian Alice Gardner to discuss his experience as an ice cream truck owner and farmer in Shepparton. We'll listen to a snippet of this interview now.
Yes, it is unusual. You wouldn't know the community otherwise. How would you know them? Any other job, because if you're doing any hospitality job, you can't do more than 5-6 years. Like we into pieces from last 6 years, I'm sick of that stuff now. But with ice cream, it's a happiness. It's not even much money, and it's not even a lot of pressure onto you. Just nice to people. They talk to you. Because you know everyone in the community, you have more information than anyone else. All the politicians want you to, we have photo with them because for the PR and stuff. And I'm sitting with you because of my truck again, I believe. That was just a community connection. So, social cohesion, and especially in Shepparton, the stuff I sell is Italian stuff. So you're living in Australia and you come from India, you're selling a bloody Italian stuff in small town Shepparton. So it's just a multiculturalism itself.
Dr. Larian Fonseca also interviewed for an oral history and then donated her papers to the library, including family histories and a copy of her PhD thesis. We'll hear from her now.
Well, I've always been known as the family's hoarder of things. I don't know about hoarder, but certainly collector. And I think even as a child, I was always interested in the sentimental value in things. I remember even in school, gathering things and keeping them. So obviously, in the process of leaving my country of birth or my homeland, it has ended up being a very useful sort of trait to have, because for me, every object, every little bit of paper is as important an experience, because it actually tells you a story. Everything contains a story. And I think in the process of collating, I suppose, the stuff for this project, what has been revealed is the importance of the way that it can tell the story of a family, of things and people past, and what it holds for, people in the future, and for others to gather their stories. So my parents met very early in life. I think my father was about 11 and my mother 9 when they first met, and they stayed friends, and they were sort of, their love provided an incredible role model about what love and loyalty is. I'm sure it had compromises. However, when we came to Australia, their whole way, the marriage contract, in a sense, changed, because the roles, both my parents had been to university and had studied, etc., but my mother was never able to use her qualifications as a teacher. So when we came to Australia, she, was able to teach, and I saw a completely different story unfold in terms of their marriage. But the love story of my parents is best reflected and recorded in when my father was only 25 and my mother 23. He was sent to, he worked for Kodak as a sales representative, I suppose, and he was sent up to Pakistan during the partition in 1947. And at that time, the horrors of the partition, the violence, and some of this can be seen in the family album, which will also be in this collection. The day before he left there, my grandmother gave him this crucifix, and he wore it around his neck. And the reason why he had it was he had to prove that he wasn't Hindu or Muslim, that he was in fact a Christian, and that sort of saved his life. And the reason this means so much is because he carried it with him since that day in 1925 in his wallet, all through. And I found it in his wallet after he died, and that was in 2013 that he died, and I've actually carried it ever since in my wallet, so that holds. But an important part of my parents' love story is these letters that I'll talk about. They, in 1953, when I was about 2, obviously, my father was sent to England on a study tour, and he was gone for 3 months. And in that time, every single day that he was away, he wrote to my mother. And just before my mother died, she said to me, she said, "Larian, when I die, in the bottom of my wardrobe, in the left-hand corner, there's a silk handkerchief with a bundle of letters, and your father's love letters to me." And I said, "Well, I don't want your love letters," type of thing. And she had said to me, she said, "Well, you might as well have them because they're all about you." And the reason she said that was because I had been the surviving child from, they'd lost 2 children before me and 1 after me. And so I was considered rather precious. So these letters are fairly amazing. They're on aerogram, and they document not only their love for each other and I suppose my father's love for me, but they also hold within them, if you think back to 1953, it was pretty much not long after the war. Britain certainly didn't have many people of colour. And so I think the value of these letters, as a sociologist, I saw the value of these letters also in capturing the socio-cultural landscape of Britain post-war, because it was the experience of a man of colour in England at that time, because he talks about he doesn't call it racism, but he talks about the way he was treated, etc. In fact, the funny story in that is that he records in there a story about how he had women who were chasing me. They thought he was a West Indian cricketer, so he was quite a good-looking man, and there's a photo here of him. So this little piece of material is, my father actually, unbeknownst to my mother, had cut a piece of her wedding sari and taken it with him as a sort of touchstone, thing. What I have done is, and this is something that is good for people to do because it's a great emotional and process as well, is I've actually transcribed all the letters into a book which I've called Leave the Letters Till We're Gone. And I did this basically for my siblings so I could give it. And what it has in it is not only all the letters transcribed, but it actually has photos associated with his travels. And these are all drawn from the actual family photo album. So, which is great. So letters are hold volumes of people's lives and history. And, one of the things I did discover while I was looking through documents was this packet of letters, which I had no idea had been kept. But once again, how often do we receive things from people, or letters and postcards? Who keeps them? But my dear mother actually had kept all the correspondence from me from overseas. So what's interesting about them is that they also have records of, various places I'd been living in and studying in and working in. And they also record what was happening in the world at that time, which was also interesting. My messages to people: don't throw letters, things like correspondence out, because they're invaluable in the end. Well, in 64, 65, we were in India. We were at my family home, the family holiday home, And I was about 14, and I heard my parents talking in hushed tones about leaving India and applying to migrate to Australia or Canada. And I was completely devastated. I was at a time of my life where I was desperately trying to hold on to my Indianness against a wave of probably the post-British Raj sort of post-colonial heritage of my parents. So my parents identified, interestingly enough, very much with being Anglo-Indian, being mixed race in India. And one of their reasons for leaving India was, ironically, that India was becoming too Indian. And with 4 daughters and a son, they were concerned that our futures, would be sort of compromised in some way. I was very upset about it. I didn't know who to turn to. So what I started doing around that time was writing a journal. And I started writing journals every day virtually, apart from the time that I've been in hospital or unwell, since I was 14, and I'm 74. So part of the artifacts that hopefully will end up in this collection, 60 years worth of journals for a start. And those journals they've been my companion. As a keeper of journals, I've been able to record extensively not only my personal reflections about day-to-day minutiae and boring aspects like relationships that I've been in and the ups and downs of those, health issues, etc. But as a person who's traveled a lot, it's something that I've loved doing. I've been a peripatetic. I've sort of, someone said to me recently, well, you like getting out of your postcode. Well, that's precisely what I've done from the minute I could. In this first passport, for example, which I've managed to keep, there are records here that bring back memories of times in places like Africa, Tangiers, where I got locked up in jail, would you believe? Sort of travel to places where there were a lot of political unrest over the years, particularly in the 70s. And I think the value of keeping documents like this is that even if you didn't have the journal, they trigger memory. So I look back, when I opened these recently, I looked back also on my journals corresponding to the time. And what was wonderful is the sort of correlation and the reference and the being able. But what was also interesting is all the little things that you forget that come back. And so as triggers to memory, particularly of critical incidents in people's lives, I think journals as well as documents like this become incredibly important. I've been in some places that, like I was in Kabul during the first coup and being shot at. I was in the Khyber Pass and getting shot at. I mean, I was in Berlin when the wall came down. How many people can you say that you've actually been at Woodstock and saw Jimi Hendrix play Star Spangled Banner? And I sometimes think, I was there because I was, so it's sort of, I sometimes think my life's a bit surreal, actually. But that's, once again, going back to the importance of things like artifacts and story, because if you can record them, they're there. So, do it. Everyone should be doing it. Just hit the voice memo on your phone. You know, like if you're telling a story, just these days it's so easy technically to just, you know, just record it, you know. I guess someone will be interested one day. One of the things that I have realized in reflecting on this whole process is that, in fact, rather than it being a sad process and a melancholic one, which it started out with because there was the fear of letting go, I've actually reframed the whole experience as something of privilege, because I really truly believe that we all have a story. We don't have to be Larry and Fonseca who's done this, that, and the other. Every single one of us has a story. We are our stories, and my mantra has always been, without them, we're nothing. So the idea of letting go of this has been a privilege, because I have been given the privilege to, in fact, through these artifacts and this record, to preserve history, to contribute to history, to preserve a story for others. So I discovered that there were some things that I felt, for all sorts of reasons, was able to let go of and have as a living bequest. Because in the end, I think they're probably safer. I think I've already said I'm 74, and I think, you know, I've got to let go of them at some stage. But there are some things I still would like to gently hang on to. So, for example, with the letters, the originals, you know, are going to be safer in the collection of the National Library Archive, whereas the book can be a post sort of death, I guess, bequest. So there's a balance. It doesn't have to. What I realized initially is that I was going to have to let go of all of this, but no, you can. You know, it's great that I can hang on to some of it till a later date. It's interesting. I've been someone who's been for many years now very comfortable with the concept of mortality and facing my own mortality. But I'm also well aware of what happens in grief. You know, when my parents died, it was a stuff, people couldn't deal with it. So what they do is they grab stuff, they throw it in boxes, put them in their garages, and then, you know, you try and get it from them, and it's just impossible. So I've always been determined to, I was determined but worried or concerned about what was going to happen with the stuff that I have. I felt like I was also, you know, responsible for some of the things that I did have from my parents and stuff. So I had started, you know, looking into where things could go. And then I was made aware of the National Library project on the Indian diaspora relating to oral histories. And a friend of mine who's quite involved in Chinese market gardener history, he sort of said to me, "You've got to do this, you've got to apply, this is an opportunity." And I went, who wants to listen to my story anyway? But it sort of grew from there. And I think as soon as I did the oral history with Anissa for this project, I just had I felt this incredible weight lift off me, because I felt this relief that, you know, my story, even in an oral form, was not my story, but the family story was going to be preserved in some way. And then it just went on from there. And then the opportunity to actually have the artifacts, etc., through the manuscripts preservation opened up. And so I didn't have a second thought about it. I mean, I did consult the family, and they were quite happy for it to be preserved. And so, as I said, it's been a privilege more than than trauma to do it. The National Library of Australia might be situated in Canberra, but this is actually about, the whole of Australia and people's stories and contributions that can be made and are relevant to all of Australia. But that's the joy of it, and that's the way that we preserve history. I think organisations like institutions such as the National Library and its archive can, helps preserve those things and keep them in history.
Seeing the connections throughout our collections shows the breadth and the depth of what the library collects. This collecting will continue beyond the formal project. The catalogue, available on the library's website, is the best way to connect with these items and the rest of our collection. Books and ongoing serials are described individually, and the ephemera is described using a finding aid, which lists the contents of the collection organised into files, one item or kit per file. When you're browsing the collection, do you know of items that we don't yet have? Family papers, letters, journals, photographs, books, newsletters, ephemera. The library continues to build ongoing relationships with communities, individuals and organisations. We invite you to contribute to our collection and ensure that it continues to reflect all Australians. Offers can be made via our website. We want to thank the community for sharing their time and their stories and helping build a collection for all Australians.